Greetings, fellow ghouls, and happy Halloween. Thanks so much for stopping by. Do feel free to take a treat from the bowl. Truthfully, I may be running a bit low on sweets. Perhaps instead I could offer you another twisted tale of terror from my collection of true scary stories. Come, pull a chair up and sit by the fire. I'll find a good one for us. Ah, yes. Here we go. The first job I ever had was working at one of those haunted Halloween hayrides. I was maybe a freshman in high school, and that October, a friend of mine, we'll call him Nick, asked me if I wanted to work with him at this place. It was called Drago's Haunted Forest. I actually hadn't spoken to Nick in a while. We had been good friends in middle school, but his family had moved after 7th grade to a slightly more rural area, and we hadn't been great at keeping in touch. He told me that Drago's had two main attractions. One was the titular haunted forest, in which guests would walk on foot through a slew of scary vignettes set up in the woods. The other was the haunted hayride, where guests would ride through the woods instead. These two attractions were located at two separate areas, and two different sets of employees/actors worked at them. Nick worked in the haunted forest, but he had called me because they needed more people to work the hayride. He said I'd have to get in costume and try to jump out and scare people as they rode through the woods. The money was absolute crap, but it sounded like a pretty fun time. One day at the beginning of October, Nick picked me up and we drove out to Drago's. On our way, he informed me of some of the basic ground rules. Most of them were common sense, but then he informed me of a particular bugaboo at Drago's. Employees were not allowed to touch the guests at all. Now, employees had never been allowed to get rough with the guests or anything like that, but in years past, the ghosts would tap guests' shoulders before scaring them, the zombies would claw at the guests while chasing them, that sort of thing. According to Nick, though, a few years ago, there had been an accident in the haunted forest, and an older woman had died. There was a portion of the haunted walk that went down by this large pond. There was a creaky wooden bridge built across the pond, and the guests would cross it as part of their route. Smoke machines set up by the edge of the pond would spill thick fog into the air, adding to the mood, but also hiding the actors beneath the bridge. They would dress up as sort of lake monsters, wait beneath the walkway, then jump out and grab the ankles of the crossing guests. This particular year, however, something went wrong. When the lake monsters sprang forth, one woman was truly scared. One of the monsters grabbed at her ankle, and she instinctively kicked him square in the mouth. As she kicked, she slipped on the wet wood of the walkway, falling and hitting her head. She apparently had a heart condition, and the surprise of the lake monster, in addition to her fall, ended up being too much for her. Drago's shut down for a year or two after that, but then reopened with this new set of rules. Most importantly, no touching. Nick and I arrived in the late afternoon, and he showed me around the place. It was kind of funny to see some of the spooky decorations in daylight. Over through the trees was an old barn that they had decorated in a sort of Texas chainsaw style. Bloody hooks dangled from the wooden beams, with fake limbs strewn about the floor. Nick was going to be playing one of the cannibalistic butchers. He would hide in the fridge and then jump out, wielding a giant meat cleaver. We met up with some other people, and they showed me to where I'd be stationed. Towards the middle of the hayride route, there was a small area in the woods designed to look like a sort of ritual sacrifice. There was an altar covered in blood and a surrounding circle of stones. There was a large pile of skulls next to the altar, and a more fresh-looking fake corpse lying across it. I would be wearing an old witch mask with green skin, a hooked nose, and dozens of warts. Beneath the altar there was a prop dagger, an old-looking bowl, and a giant bottle of chocolate syrup. As the hayride went by, my job was to pretend to cut up the corpse on the altar, then pull out the bowl full of chocolate syrup and drink it like blood. It sounded easy enough. Then the entire Drago's staff gathered together. That night was the sort of dress rehearsal night. The forest wasn't officially open to the public yet, so to practice, the employees of the two different areas would attempt to scare each other. People working the hayride would take the haunted forest walk, and people working the walk would take the hayride. The walk was up first, so my new coworkers and I set off, following the trail through the forest. I had to admit, it was pretty wicked. First, some zombies popped out from behind the trees, then some men with chainsaws chased us up to the old barn, where I knew Nick was stationed. He popped out from the fridge, holding a severed head and swinging his cleaver wildly at us. The rest of the hayride employees continued on past the barn, but I waited back for a second, talking to Nick. He made sure I was having a good time and showed me some of the detail in his severed head prop. One of the chainsaw guys came over too, and we chatted with him as well. He showed me his chainsaw and how they removed the chain to make it safe. After a few minutes, I left the barn and continued on the walk. I could see the group off in the distance, but I was lagging pretty far behind. After my detour at the barn, I hustled through the trees, disoriented in the darkness, but doing my best to follow the path. I came around a bend and found myself on the edge of a large pond with a wooden walkway across. This must have been the part Nick had mentioned, where the woman had died. A heavy artificial fog clouded the surface of the water, but the scene was quiet. Would there be some spooky surprise here? Or had they canceled this scene altogether because of the accident? I tiptoed cautiously across the bridge. I got to about the halfway point and nothing. It seemed like I was alone. That made sense. Perhaps it was a bit too soon to attempt any sort of scare at the pond. I picked up my pace, looking to catch up with the group, and something caught my foot. And I tripped and fell, crashing onto the wooden walkway. While dizzy for a moment, I looked back through the fog, just in time to see a hand pull away and back under the bridge. At least, I think that's what I saw. What the heck, I thought? He said no one was supposed to touch the guests, and whoever was beneath the walkway had fully grabbed my ankle. I shouted back through the fog. "Not cool, man. You're gonna seriously hurt someone." No answer. I got to my feet, brushing myself off and checking my elbows for any scrapes. Whoever was under there wasn't talking. Maybe they felt bad for tripping me. It was probably an accident. It was hard to see anything in the thick fog. I continued on my way and caught up with the rest of the hayride workers. We enjoyed the rest of the walk. There was a haunted carnival section with murderous clowns, a fake cemetery with plenty of ghouls. You get the picture. At the conclusion of the walk, we all gathered at the main area, and the director of Drago's asked us to give feedback on the walk and areas of improvement, that kind of thing. After my tumble on the bridge, I was compelled to speak up. I know this is a sensitive subject after what happened over at the pond, but whoever is hiding under the dock could be a bit more careful about tripping people. It's scary for those hands to come up out of the water, but they came too close. I tripped and took a hard fall. The rest of the employees just looked at me, totally silent. I'm not sure exactly what you're talking about, the director said. No one is stationed around the pond, and especially not under the bridge. A perfect tale for this Halloween night. Imagine going to one of those haunted forests only to discover that it was actually haunted. Anyway, don't let me keep you. I'm sure you have plenty of other houses to stop at. Enjoy the full moon and happy Halloween.